if we can help him rank higher for certain search terms, eventually these stories will start to, his website and information will start to be more prominent. Because at the end of the day, really, he was hurting himself, of course, but, there was never one complaint from a patient about any kind of malpractice or anything along those lines.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples. Not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz. Real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Okay, so I was buying gutters for my house, and I got two quotes. The first guy, he came out, he did some measurement, he talked about some options. It was helpful. Oh, the second guy, poor guy. I think he was new to sales, so he would say the quiet parts out loud, right? He'd say, okay, I offered the same-day discount and you wouldn't buy. What if I told you stuff about how bad our competitors are? Maybe then you'd buy. Okay, where's the competitor's gutter? It's somewhere in my trunk. Let me see. Would you buy today? And he had the binder, the sales binder. So, but being there, I was literally in the customer's shoes. It made me realize I had this epiphany. People don't want to be sold. They want to be helped. They do not want to be sold. They want to be helped. So when I saw the following lesson in a podcast guest application, I knew I had to talk to the marketer behind it. He says, consumers don't want to be marketed to, but for. Love it. We'll hear the story behind that lesson, along with many other lesson-filled stories from my next guest. Joining me now is Joe Karasin, Chief Marketing Officer at CircleIT. Thanks for joining me, Joe.
Yeah, no problem, Daniel. Nice to be here. And I'm excited to talk to you about some of this stuff. I hate gutter sales, too.
Let's keep it out of the gutter. Let's talk about your background. So right now you are managing a team of 4 at a startup. You manage a budget of spend of about $200,000 to $500,000 per month. And at this startup, you grew users from 1 million to 5 million in 1 year. Nice job. The startup is called CircleIT. CircleIT has raised $5.1 million in Series A funding with participation from TeleSoft Partners, a venture capital firm that has raised over $1 billion in capital. So, Joe, give us an idea. What is your day like as Chief Marketing Officer at CircleIT?
Yeah, so my general job is to ensure that people are both starting to utilize and then we retain them on our platform. CircleIT is a trusted service that helps people send cards and gifts to their loved ones for any future date or milestone, even after they're gone. So we are a death tech startup, which I know probably sounds creepy, but we're getting close to Halloween now, so I figure it might be another reason to have a death tech on the show.
I have to admit, I hadn't heard that term before, but it is probably something that is emerging as the population ages. Well, let's jump into some of the lessons you learned from your career, from the things you made in marketing and the stories behind them. So I want to jump right into that first lesson that I love. Consumers don't want to be marketed to, but for. So I think I know what you mean by that, but what do you mean by that? And tell us how you learned that lesson.
Yeah, so I've been doing this for about 15 years now, digital marketing in particular. And, one of the things that I got, what I used to do a lot of was a lot of lead generation, right? It was a lot of, give me your info and we'll get it to a salesperson and they'll call and sell, and that was a lot of what I did. But, one of the things that I've learned is that we did a lot of product focused marketing here. When I first started coming into Circle, it was, hey, our app does this thing and this would be good for you, and that, that's fine. Don't get me wrong. You need to highlight the features and functions of whatever it is you are trying to market. But that just still even today comes across you need this because I'm pointing my finger. You can't see me doing it, but I'm pointing my finger and, I always hated things like that when I was a kid. You need to eat your vegetables or you need to go do this, clean your room. That's how it comes across. And so to me, it's what we learned is that we started like taking the users that we have, like people that are actually really identifying with our technology, the ones that are really resonating with it. And we're letting them tell their stories and how they used our technology, and how it's benefiting them. And then we just connect the dots. It's not a huge thing where we're like, you got to do this, you got to do this. We're instead saying, hey, this is Donna, and she is an Alzheimer's caregiver for her mother. And she's using, she's telling the story. I'm using CircleIT to record memories of my mom, so that way I can share them with my grandkids and great grandkids, so her memory is not forgotten, and her story lives on with others. That sort of thing. Those in the palliative care industry, those in the military, police, cancer patients, they're very cognizant of the need for this kind of technology, because they know that, tomorrow's not guaranteed, but they all want to be there for their loved ones in the future. And that's what we give them. And then we just let them tell their story and how how our technology is benefiting them. And that's why I'm saying, like, we market for the consumer. We're saying, like, this is who's using our technology, and this is how they're using it. And then, if we need to help connect the dots for anybody who's watching or listening to what we're doing, then, we can do that. But it's usually pretty obvious to anybody who sees the message, like, oh my God, yeah, I need that too. So that's what I mean. Instead of marketing for instead of to.
Yeah, I hear you. And, obviously we've seen case studies, testimonials, telling the customer story. These are very effective in almost every industry, B2B or B2C. But I would imagine it's because the industry you're working in is sensitive, right? It's, we don't want to talk or think about death, whatever age we are. Telling those stories, I would guess in your industry especially, and there's probably many other industries like that where it's a bit more of a sensitive topic, would be especially helpful because, saying the product features of, like, okay, step 1, you die. Step 2, this product feature happens. I just think people would turn off to that right away. They don't want to think about dying, but kind of seeing that emotional story about, okay, this is what happened. I would think it kind of opens up their mind a bit. I mean, have you noticed that?
Well, yeah. So funny story. So that's how CircleIT actually came to be. Our founder and CEO's father actually gave him a box of like greeting cards and instructions for him to follow after he passed away. He wasn't sick. He wasn't ill. There was nothing wrong with him in 2011. And then suddenly in 2012, he passed away unexpectedly. And so now Art had this box of things that he had to do. He had these like cards that he needed to give to his nieces and nephews. He had to make sure his mother got flowers on their anniversary every year. And so all this stuff. And the more he started to tell people about what happened and talk to people, he recognized that that's, people wanted to be there for their loved ones. And so then this gave them the opportunity to do that. It's technology solving a problem that we all have. My mother did the same thing. She left a letter for me in 2009, when she passed away that I found, it's just that parenting type letter that you get, I want you to grow up and be happy, and I want you to get married, and I want you to, those kinds of things. And, so that kind of impetus is there for people, and not necessarily even those that are ill or sick or anything, but it definitely is there. And so these stories, like that story, like Art's father's story, my mother's story, they are things that like, somebody who isn't thinking about death may hear and go, oh, well, I would love to make sure that like my grandchild gets a wedding card, for me when they get married, that kind of stuff. And the thing is like, and through that, then people can kind of start to learn the different functions and features of what we do. Cause there's definitely some daily kind of use cases for what we do as well. So, I think that there's more to it, but that's really the magic of what we've built and what we're trying to talk to people about.
And it sounds very familiar. Did we write a Marketing Sherpa case study about this?
We did actually. Yeah, we
okay.
talked about it, and we kind of took the data approach and the informational approach, and then I saw that you were looking for podcast guests, and I said, well, I like Marketing Sherpa. I've been been reading their case studies for some time, so I might as well, jump on and kind of meet Daniel for the first time. So here we are.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Joe, and I'm going to include a link to that case study in the show notes for this podcast so anyone can read those details if they want. But it also got me thinking when you talk about marketing 2, marketing 4, it brings up an essential question. I wonder what, in your opinion, is the difference between marketing and advertising. So it's funny. It's a fundamental question. What's the difference between marketing and advertising? It's something we don't think about much. I'm involved at a local university. I'm on the professional advisory board. If anyone isn't doing that in wherever they live, I highly recommend you do that. I mean, one, it's giving back. And yeah, try to be a good guy, right? But the other thing is, because then you talk to these college students and they look at marketing and advertising in such a fresh way, and they ask you questions like this: what is the difference between marketing and advertising? And what I answered when I thought about it and how, kind of it applies to your kind of 2 and 4 thing is, marketing is creating that essential strategy. This isn't a textbook definition. They can get the textbook definition. Marketing is creating that essential strategy where we're helping the ideal customer determine what product or service is the right fit for them in our industry. And often, hopefully, it's ours, right? But sometimes it's not. And so we, push them in the right direction. Advertising, and I started my career in advertising as a copywriter at an ad agency, but advertising is simply getting the message out there, right? I think so many brands, they kind of skip ahead and they just go straight to the advertising part. So they don't really think through that strategy of, okay, there is a fundamental decision a customer has to make in our industry or involving our product or service, and how do we communicate that out? They just go, boom, right to the instant sell part. So I just wondered, in your opinion, Joe, what do you think? What is the difference between marketing and advertising? Why is that important? Why should we care about that?
So first off, I don't 100% know that we need to care about it, but because it is something that I think, hot take, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, I will mention, I'm going to warn people listening. Joe had mentioned he had been a political talk radio host in college. We're going to get some hot controversial takes here. I'm ready for it. Bring it, Joe.
Nothing political, just marketing. That's all I like to talk about these days.
Yeah.
Marketing and baseball. That's all I really talk about these days. So to me, these days, what I think at a certain point, they definitely were two distinct entities, right? I think that there's that, but I think that today, especially in the digital space, you have to be both. You have to be the strategist and the executor. You have to be the one that executes the strategy and the messaging as well. Whether that's, I was a freelancer for a long time. I've worked in, I've built agencies. I've worked in, on teams. I've been in dedicated roles. I've had to do it all. I've had to learn it all. And I don't know too many people who've really had to specialize. I do know people that have done that, but it was some time ago. Nowadays I feel like everybody in the marketing department, they're working on the advertising side. They're working on the marketing side. They're working on strategizing. They're working on customer profiles and or avatars, and figuring that out. And then, and then advertising is well, what's a creative way to say that, and how do we do that? But especially in a startup, I found too that we're all wearing every hat. I've been involved in design conversations. I've been involved in UI, UX conversations, those kinds of things. We're all kind of in that boat. So everybody's kind of got a thing. And we really do focus on marketing and advertising is really just one bucket of activities that we do. Within the confines of our marketing department. And I like versatile people, and I like people that are, going to be able to pick up and do things. I don't, to be well, I don't really know how to write an ad. I know how to think about the structure of where we're trying to position it. It's cool. I mean, that's important, but let's get everybody, let's get a more well-rounded approach we're going to take here. So to me, that's even kind of the sort of person that I would bring on a team as well. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't care too much about the difference between those two things. There is one, sure. I agree 100% with you, but I don't think it's as important as we like to think.
Fair enough. I'll make this one final point in our version of Marketing Crossfire here. And point counterpoint. So I agree with everything you said. And I think that's why being aware of some of these fundamentals and some of these distinctions is so important. Like when we get rolling in our daily job, we're just so heads down, we don't think about these things. Because like I said, when I started earlier in my career, and this is true, in especially bigger organizations as well, right? So we worked at an advertising agency. And one of the reasons our clients had us as an advertising agency, it was for the creative and strategy and all these other things, was media buying, right? Because back then, I was writing print ads in the Wall Street Journal, like those types of things. And, print production, doing direct mail and stuff.
Sure.
And the media buying part, that's really how ad agencies started, if you look at the history of it. And so there was really a clear distinction. There was that marketing department. They were coming up with the marketing strategy, and sure, the advertising agencies helping. And then the advertising, we were having that, kind of creative execution and getting the message out there. Today, as you mentioned, especially at startups, it's so easy to conflate the two. It's so easy when the floor on a media spend now is like $5 on Facebook.
Right.
You could never do that back in the day. You had to be more professional. And so what happens is I worry that we do skip some of these fundamentals in the process and we get right into advertising. And when we do that, kind of like the story I love you said, is we just get into like, okay, let's advertise some product features. Let's go. As opposed to stopping back and thinking, wait a minute, what is the marketing strategy here? And you guys came up with a great marketing strategy of like, we have these customers who know this very emotional, difficult story. Let's help them tell the story versus, Facebook says boost your post, boom, let's boost it and, sell. So,
Well, and I blame in some way, and this will be the last thing I say about this. I do blame the platforms that we have for that conflation. Yes. I blame Google. Yeah. I blame Facebook. I blame them all because that's what they do. They give you the strategy up front. They're like, hey, pick your targeting, pick this, pick that. So you can do all that. And then you can create an ad on top of it. So I think that that conflation really was sort of a product of these digital platforms that we've all become so accustomed to. I think the last vestige of really thinking about marketing solely as marketing is really probably SEO.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, putting powerful tools in maybe uninformed hands. But all right, let's get back.
Sometimes.
Yeah, let's get back to a lesson from your career, and I love this next one.
Sure.
Pretty much all your lessons are pretty good. Permission-based marketing works, and consumers will give you permission. So, how did you learn this lesson, Joe?
So, a number of years ago, not as many as I think sometimes, but I was the marketing director at a really big residential real estate company. And if you're familiar with real estate, especially on the residential side, it's, leads, and then you get 50 phone calls from an agent, hoping to represent you to either sell or buy a home. That's really all it is. And so that's really kind of the thing. And so one of the things that was happening is we got this new technology, and it was a product created by a company based out in Boston. And it was a website that, had a lot of bells and whistles essentially on the back end to capture information. One of the things that they did was they put up these things like a gateway on property photos. So you would, what would happen is the consumer would be on their, on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and they would see, hey, a new 4-bedroom house is on sale in, Livonia, Michigan. And so they would go, well, I'm looking to move to Livonia. So let me look at it. So they click the ad and it would take them to the website. And then before they could look at the photos, it'd be like, hey, let us show you other houses too. Here's gives your name, email, phone number, when are you thinking of moving? Are you pre-approved for a mortgage? All these things. And, people were like, oh, at first they would do it, but most of the information you got was junk. It was, we'd get a lot of my first name is, F and my last name's U, that kind of stuff. And, my phone number is 123, go to heck, that kind of stuff. So, be oh, okay, this is great. But the thing was, they and our agents, the salespeople weren't converting leads at all. They were really not doing well at it. And so, one of the things that we came up with was, I guess I came up with, I didn't really have a team there. One of the things I came up with was, what as a younger person at the time, I don't know what the hell to do to buy a house. I certainly don't know how to sell a house because I've never sold it. I've never owned one. So it's probably confusing for people. And so what we did was we created these really comprehensive buyer and seller guides. They were like in depth. They had like actual information in them. Something that like a person would go, oh, wow. Not like a typical kind of online guide where you go and you're like, it'll tell you like, oh, here's 5 tips to, leverage your sales data on TikTok or something like that, and you click and it's like, oh, here's lesson number 1 on TikTok, make sure you download the app. And then here's the other 5 tips, it was real like data that people could use. And, it wasn't very salesy. It wasn't like, oh, and by the way, use our brokerage, that kind of stuff. It was really just like, here's how you buy a house. Here's how you sell a house. And here's how you buy a new house before selling your current house. Things like that people were actually concerned about, in the real estate market. And so we would give them that because at the end of the day, like if I wanted to see a house, there's a huge website out there. There's actually a handful of them, but there's one in particular where I can go look at all the houses for sale in my city and look at the photos and see the videos, the same photos that are provided on the websites by real estate agents because it's all uploaded through their MLS system to Zillow. So why would I give you my information for you to call me? Again, 4, not 2, right? I don't need you blowing up my phone. Like, give me something that will help me. Okay, now you're helping me. And then, once that happened and we started remarketing to the people that were actually downloading these guides and utilizing them, all of a sudden they started to see, higher close rates. They were, actually taking these people on property tours and selling them homes or getting into their homes and listing the house for sale, on the other side. So it really was like, permission marketing is still, I think, like the gold standard. That's one reason why I've always been a big advocate of paid search over paid social for a lot of reasons, which is a whole nother conversation. But I also, though, think that like consumers will give you permission to market to them if you're giving them something of value. And that's something that, I've taken here at CircleIT as well, is like, we're providing something of tremendous value to the consumer, and sure enough, they will download the app and they'll give us their information so we can then utilize it. The difference is like, we're not giving their data up to third parties. We don't have any ads or anything like that in the app. So really the data is solely used to improve their experience within our product.
Yeah,
So,
I love that example because I feel like as marketers, we just are so obsessed with forms, right? Because we need to produce a certain amount of leads a quarter or a month or a week or whatever your quota is. And let's just put forms on everything. Let's put them all over the place. And if they're crappy leads, that's someone else's problem. So I love that idea of like, actually providing value there. So but something I want to ask is too, so that is one part of the journey. And I wonder, were you able to work with the salesforce at all with some sales enablement? Because, if the salesforce is accustomed to that dialing for dollars and getting a different kind of lead in versus, as a content marketer myself, we're setting up a certain promise, we're setting up a certain thing that, way that the customer thinks they're going to interact with us. So it can be disjunctive. You go from getting this value to all of a sudden getting sold really hard. And so, for example, we have a free digital marketing course. And in the session on headline writing, Flint McLaughlin teaches like, here's the flow for the customer. It starts with attention, interest, engagement, and then relationship. And so with the ads, you're talking about attention, interest, kind of getting into engagement. But then, you're giving those leads, those people you worked really hard to build that trust with, you're giving them over to this other group and saying, okay, like further engage them and build a relationship with them. So were you ever able to get involved with the sales force and kind of enable them and say, hey, it's a different strategy. These people coming here be different. Here's how you got to try to, serve them.
So I'm going to tell you a little secret that I don't talk about a lot, but it is something. So there was a 2-year period in my career where the auto industry in Detroit like just tanked, and I didn't like all of a sudden companies that I was freelancing for and built up as a clients were cutting expenses. And at the time, digital marketing really wasn't like on their like, oh, we've still got print advertising we have to mail out, so let's make a decision here. And they would cut me as an expense. And so I needed to survive. And so I got into door-to-door sales.
Wow.
Yeah, I was selling, oddly enough, gutters, windows, siding as you
So
initially started. Yeah,
So all
all that kind of stuff, right? And So I learned a lot about sales through that process, because there is no harder cold call than knocking on someone's door in the middle of their day or right before dinner or right after, whatever. And like them opening the door and seeing your smiling face, at the door saying like, "Hey, saw your windows had a bunch of fog in them. Want to replace them?" But so I learned a lot about that. And so one of the things that they actually had me do at this real estate brokerage I worked for was they had me do sales training with some of the agents, not all of them, but a handful of them. And so, especially ones that they thought really needed the coaching. And so I would kind of coach them on how to respond to these specific leads, so they weren't knocking on their door and saying, "Hey, saw your siding is falling off your house. Let's replace it. Here's a contract." I taught them how to approach these people, because it was a different kind of handoff. This is a different kind of lead than what you're used to. So let's treat it differently. And the first thing you need to do, and this is another thing that I use as like a lesson that isn't on, the list we were talking about today, but another lesson I have is, don't treat your leads like leads. Don't treat them like a number in your churn system, that you're just spitting out of a CRM and like, "Hey, you got to call this one now. Hey, you got to call this one now." Get to know them. Don't even bother with, like, "Oh, it looks like you're looking to buy a house." Ask them like, does your current house have the things you need to be successful? Does your current house have all the things you want? "Oh, no." Well, have you ever thought about looking for something with a space for a home office or whatever, whatever the thing is. So yeah, I did get involved with the sales team quite a bit. And that, that helped. It was good for me to have had this sort of like boot camp like experience for 2 years, learning how to sell in a very strange sort of like, almost archaic, encyclopedia salesman, environment, because then I could kind of say like, "Okay, that's not how you're going to do this, but here's some responses. Here's how you can eliminate objections. Here's how you guys can really do this stuff." So I kind of learned a lot about that, which also then in turn made me better at marketing and advertising, as it sounds like you would like me to use as a distinction.
Those two things exist, Joe. Don't pretend they don't. And sales. And I bring this up because also sales exists. And I'm not joking, because I would think many marketers would be in your position. They would change a strategy. They would get the leads and boom, they wash their hands of it. They're done. And they forget that there's marketing, there's advertising. Well, now there's sales. And until we get, to actually, we have a customer, we need the sales force to do the right things, to follow up on the promise in the right way. So good for you for taking it that extra step and that extra mile. And I also have to mention, when I was in college, I did telemarketing. And having that sales background, I'm not joking, that is so helpful once you get into advertising and marketing. And so if there's anyone listening and you don't have that sales background, certainly not saying get into telemarketing or door-to-door sales and go that far, but definitely meet with your sales team, meet with your sales leads, go on some sales calls, sit in on sales calls, listen to recordings of sales calls, and you'll get such a better understanding of what is the next step that's happening. And to Joe's point, you'll find other ways to actually help the customer. Like, that's so important, because what's probably going to happen is there's going to be some common questions you're going to hear come up, and that is great in your marketing and in your content, and you can help answer those questions and bring more people in. So kudos to you, Joe. Even though we don't agree on everything, we agree on that. I like that. So let's look at your next lesson. Give a choice of yes or yes. Now, this sounds like it came from a sales training. I got it. This is like, Sandler sales training or something like that. But so what do you mean by give a choice of yes or yes?
So here's the thing, right? So I'm sure if you are in marketing, you're familiar with how to build a landing page, and you're familiar with all the different optimization ways to do that. And I'm not talking to you, Daniel. I'm talking to the audience. I'm sure, you guys out there, are, familiar with landing pages. So one of the things that I noticed was, I was marketing for a law firm, and, one of the general practice did divorce and family law and some of those things. And then also bankruptcies, a lot of Chapter 7, Chapter 13 type bankruptcies. And so one of the things, started out with was simply like a landing page after, they would get there after, a couple of marketing touches through, whether it be like display ads or social, whatever we were doing. And they would get there and it would basically just have here's your info and, file now, which basically would just get them to talk to the attorney about, where to file and get them in the office to get their bankruptcy case going. But one of the things that I noticed is that like people weren't really clicking that button too much. I mean, they were, but not as much as we wanted. And it turns out we weren't doing a whole lot of educating in the initial funnel building process. We weren't doing a lot of that. We had done some email, things like that we're following up, but nothing really concrete. So what we did was we instituted a 2-button system. Instead of it being file now, it was basically the two options were, yeah, let's get on the phone with the attorney, or I need to learn more. I don't really know if this is the right decision for me. I don't know if maybe I should go through like a debt consolidation service or if I should file bankruptcy. And what kind of bankruptcy do I need to file? Do I file Chapter 7? Do I file Chapter 11? Am I looking for, those, what kind of bankruptcy do I need? Am I looking to liquidate, and pay off the debt, or am I looking to reorganize, all that kind of stuff. So by giving people the option to actually look into this a little bit further from that point, we actually started to see more conversion. Again, it was really about educating and, giving people more information. So we weren't telling them like to say, it wasn't yes or no. It was yes or yes, but not right now. Yes, I need to learn more, that sort of thing. It was always like that qualifier. But once we did that, what we had done at that point too was effectively we had removed objections. We had removed the objection that would come when the attorney would get on the phone with the person and say, okay, well, why don't you come out in the office? We'll look over all your paperwork and we'll get you going. Their objection would be like, well, I just don't know what I'm doing. But at this point, we've given them comprehensive educational materials that would help them, kind of getting back to the lessons from the real estate brokerage. Educating the consumer gave them more confidence to make a decision. And so, granted, I'm sure that this is kind of old hat, in a lot of ways. And I'm sure this is probably, something that, I'm sure if I listen to every single episode of the podcast, people have probably said this in some fashion or another before. But in this situation, to really get them to like, to give them a choice of yes and yes, I learned that in door-to-door sales too. Like, I learned that knocking on doors and saying like, are you going to replace your windows this year or next year? That kind of thing. And, well, I don't know. I mean, I know I need to replace them, but when, I don't know. Well, let's talk about it. That sort of thing.
Well, I think there's two great lessons there. One, that's the type of things you can learn. You talk about the objections. That's the type of things you can learn by sitting in on sales calls and, going on sales calls. You kind of hear those objections. But the other thing is, it also reminds me of the headlines, because there are some headlines you see where it's like, you're ready to replace your windows today, or whatever those question headlines. You got to be really careful with question headlines, because there's many I see that are easy to answer no to. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like whoever wrote them, we're so focused on our own brands, and so whoever wrote them is so into their own brands, and like people are excited to get new gutters and siding and windows and whatever, or contact a lawyer or whatever it is. And so we put those question things in there, like, wouldn't it be great if you had a lawyer today? And most people are like, no, I don't care about this at all. I care about baseball, or
right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think that's another great lesson there too. When you think about writing your headlines, you want it to be yes and yes in terms of it's a natural flow down into your copy, not, well, they can easily answer no and end it.
Right. Of course.
So let's talk. So the first half of the podcast, we talk about lessons from things you made. The second half of the podcast, we talk about lessons from people you collaborated with. Two key things we do as marketers: we make things. That's a really cool thing about being a marketer. We also make them with people. So let's look at your first lesson here. It says, you need to believe in your product or service, otherwise you'll burn out quickly. Very true. You learned this from Art Shake, the founder and CEO of CircleIT. So how did you learn this from Art?
Yeah, so Art is, the circumstances that led to Art and I meeting are the kind of stuff you see in, movies that like, you know, you think like, oh, that's not how it happened,
There was
but it
a
really
meet
did
cute.
happen.
There was a meet cute.
Yeah, not that much, just a little more,
Okay.
a little less. Yeah. But so what happened was, and I'll try to make this quick, this part of it. So I had built an agency for somebody down in Metro Detroit. And, at one point what they wanted to do was bring me on as part owner. That was sort of the deal. And then that fell through with the, pandemic, starting to crop up. They had shut down for a couple weeks in Michigan. And so at that point, they were like, well, we're not going to do that anymore. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to work here anymore then. So I quit. And, I was the original, I wasn't so quiet about it, but I was quitting, and so we went off to, I moved in with my fiance, well, she wasn't my fiance at the time, it was my girlfriend, but now we're engaged. So
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Getting married in 48 days. So, so anyway, so we get up there and, a company that I had been working with through this agency I was building, they wanted to hire me full time. They were based in Boston and, I love Boston. It's a great city. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, let's go to Boston. It was a good opportunity. And then, then Massachusetts shuts down and they're like, hey, we can't justify onboarding anybody new at this point. So no job for you. And I was like, okay, cool. So I still don't have a job. So then, another company, another company in Chicago actually contacted me and they hired me. And then their first quarter profits were terrible. So then they cut all their new hires out. 18 of us just gone, like with no ceremony whatsoever. I was like, okay, cool. So now I'm out of a job again. But in the meantime, what had happened was everybody who was a client of the agency I'd built, they weren't getting anything done for them because the people that I built the agency for weren't really too keen on like running an agency. So I said, okay, well, so people started calling me. So I was like, well, yeah, I'll help you. Yeah, I'll help you. Yeah, I'll help you. And pretty soon I had a huge client list on my own. And I was like, well, I'll just freelance. So in the process of trying to get more business, I run across a LinkedIn post, and they're like, hey, I need a Google Ads expert, to bring on as a freelancer or as a contractor. And I said, well, let me talk to this guy. So, it's for this thing called CircleIT. Never heard of it, didn't know anything about it. And there wasn't a whole lot of information in the description about what the company was. So I said, okay, well, I will, guess I'll meet, this person and see what they have to say. And so I get on this call with Art and he's telling me what CircleIT is. And like my jaw hit the floor. Cause as I mentioned earlier, my mother left me this letter. His father left him letters and cards and things like that. We had this really strange, what I thought was at the time, a very, very, very unique experience that we both shared. Turns out, like I said, there's plenty of people. I think, the comedian Ali Wong was just on The Daily Show the other day telling about how her father did the same thing. So there's, this is not as uncommon as I thought. So anyway, but what I was learning was like, as I heard more about this, I'm like, this is something like I need to be marketing. This isn't Windows. This isn't, real estate services or legal services or any of the other things that I've marketed, which we'll talk about more interesting products that I've marketed later. I'm sure, but, this is something that's it's in my core. Like, this is something that it's like one of the most important things that's ever happened to me was finding this letter from my mother after she passed away that she had written, a few months before she did. She knew things were going poorly with her cancer treatment and that sort of thing. And so I'm like, yeah, I got to do this. And what I'm learning, and I continue to learn this from Art, in working with Art is like, and everybody on our team really, it's not just he and I, it's the whole team. We're all so we're so mission driven. We believe in this so much. Like, you just don't get tired. Like, I just don't get tired. I love it so much. I love to do like all the things that we're doing. I love marketing. I love the concept. I talk about it a lot. My fiance yells at me all the time, because like I actually want to sit and watch the commercials through like TV shows and things like that, or the ads on YouTube videos or whatever, because like I like to study them, learn them, and criticize them at some point, or be like, hey, that's a good idea. We should, think about that. Like those kinds of things. But this is something completely different. I firmly believe like that the world needs this technology. We need to have it. It's a completely private, secure communication tool on its own, like without any of the other like interesting things that we're doing. Like that alone, with all your data being sold by Meta and some of these other companies, to be able to communicate with your loved ones, like to be able to, where I could say something to my fiance that then I'm not going to see an ad for later on my Facebook feed or whatever. Like that's beautiful. I love that. I love the fact that like I'm not being marketed to, I'm being marketed for in these cases. So, but yeah, that by the fact that like it's so important and like we love it so much, I feel like, we're actually, I feel like for like the first time in my career, I'm really doing like something good in the world as opposed to just doing good for my clients or customers.
I think that's a beautiful thing, and I wish that for everyone that's listening to this podcast. That's the ultimate we can have in our career. And I want to ask, so I know for you it was kind of fate, serendipity, kismet, but I wonder also, looking back, if there was anything you would do, like if you had to live your life over, let's say you looked back now that you did this, is there anything you would do intentionally to get to this point? Because I was interviewing earlier on the How I Made It in Marketing podcast, Julian Rio. He's the Assistant Vice President of International Marketing of Ring Central. And one of his lessons was, don't set yourself strict career goals. Learn how to uncover and seize opportunities. And the one biggest thing he said he would do is, like, never set those 5 and 10 year career goals, whatever, like that they always try to push on you, because then you're focused on going down this path. And he's like, just, build your skills. And so when the opportunities come along, you can hop on them. So I know it's probably a tough question, but beautiful serendipity. Hope we all have that in our life. But if you had to live that career over and you can say, okay, here are steps I would intentionally take to be able to find something I'm passionate about. Have you thought about that? Have you learned anything in hindsight?
Interesting. So like the thing is, it's funny because like, I think like when I was talking about it, now that I hear your question, I'm like, it sounds like this is the only thing I'm passionate about, and it's not. We've talked, a little bit before the show, just kind of getting to know each other, and that I'm a politics junkie. I love baseball, all those kinds of things. So there's a bunch of stuff that I am really passionate about and that I feel like I could get behind. So, to me, it was more like I needed to learn the skills because I didn't go to school to be a marketer. I didn't get a business degree. The initial plan for Joe was go to school, get your degree. I double majored in political science and philosophy. And then I was supposed to do what everybody who majors in political science and philosophy does after that, go to law school. That was the whole thing. So I'd applied for, law schools and things like that. Turns out, it wasn't for me. Not that I didn't get into schools. I just didn't want to be a lawyer. So I took a job, doing data analysis for a political organization and fell in love with data and numbers. And, then, mom was sick and I moved and, all that kind of stuff came back, and then, was helping take care of her, and then she passed away. And then I have this sort of like, lost period in my life. And so I learned how to do, and I'm sure we'll talk about this one as well too. I learned how to do some marketing stuff because of a friend who needed help. And so I'm self-taught, in everything that I do. I never went to school for any of this. So yeah, maybe I would have done that. I don't know. I wouldn't have done it because that wasn't what I wanted to do originally, but I fell in love with marketing and what I do. And so intentionally, I don't know. It's hard for me to say because I know a lot of what I'm doing right now, but also even prior was really kind of not, it wasn't intentional. All of it was sort of like, hey, this is what you do, and here's some cool stuff you can do with it. and now you can go market your stuff, So, now I'm a little more, thoughtful about, I guess, some of those things, but if, up until this point, not really.
Well, it sounds like you had a real openness, I would say, is the one thing. I mean, I would say there are other people who would like have that goal of going to law school and I know someone specifically, a friend of mine who went to law school, like later in their career deep as a very successful lawyer and was like, I don't know, So I think that is one lesson in itself there is being open. I took the LSAT myself, the LSAT, whatever. And I thought I was going to go that route. My girlfriend's roommate was in law school and I saw what it really meant. And I'm like, boy, that's not me. I do not want to do that. So I think the thing that we need to do for ourselves is the same thing we need to do for our brands, like have an understanding of our value proposition generally, which will change based on whatever our role is, but then be prepared to pivot. Like, as you've mentioned many times in your career, I mean, 2009 for me, there was the Great Recession, and then, there's COVID and all this. You had to pivot many times. And just being in digital marketing that we're in, it's such a fast-moving space with, not to mention just the macro economy changing, just our space changes so fast and so much, I started before these social media platforms, but I remember when MySpace was a thing or Facebook, or, now it's TikTok or, Discord or who knows. So I think that one of my other podcast guests, he mentioned have a Gumby attitude towards everything. And I think that's maybe if I had to put words in your mouth, I think you've kind of had a Gumby attitude and said, let me be flexible here. Yeah, no, that's a good point. A lot of it was at a certain point in my life, a lot of it was mainly just survival. It was if you don't do something, you're not gonna eat. So let's, and obviously, like other people can't see me, but I'm very well fed, so I'm doing okay. Very nice. Man's got to eat. That's also motivation.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about another lesson you had. Established brands still need to market innovatively. You learned this from Mike Almond, the owner and president of Lover's Lane. So how did you learn this from Mike?
Oh, okay. So a little background, because obviously you guys aren't all Midwesterners listening. Lover's Lane is, as Daniel mentioned, or we talked about earlier, is an adult novelty store. A very well-known one in the Metro Detroit area, the Chicago area, and the Indianapolis area, and in Cleveland also. So they have 30, 40 retail outlets, like brick and mortar. Been in business for years and years and years, 30, 40 years. And I was very aware of this company because, like, when I was a kid, you would see their commercials on TV, or you would see, as I said, their ads in the back of, the pay. I forget what they call those free daily papers or weekly papers they put out.
Right?
Alternative news weeklies. Yeah. The
Metro
Times. Metro Times in Detroit was a big one. And so, very, very cognizant of their brand, knew, the stores, seen them, all that kind of stuff. So to me, as a marketer, you hear it like Coca-Cola has to spend money on marketing. They have to spend money on advertising. And it's like, yeah, they do. You're right. Because, somehow people are going to forget what Coca-Cola is, if they don't. Or, younger people are never going to heard of it because they'll only have heard of Pepsi or something like that. So I'm working at building this agency and, in Plymouth, Michigan. It was the first day we actually got the office, like very first day. I'm still setting up like computers and helping with, let's move this desk over here, that kind of stuff, unpacking boxes, all that kind of stuff. And this guy wanders into this office, like there's no signage, nothing. Like it doesn't look like an open business because it really wasn't. This guy walks in and he goes, oh, he's like, I didn't know there was anybody that ever worked in here. I said, yeah, first day we just opened. And he goes, well, what do you guys do? And so I was like, well, we're a digital marketing agency, and and we kind of got into it. And he goes, oh, he's like, can I have your card? He's like, I think we need to talk. I'm like, okay. And so again, more serendipity, right? Like just random person walks into my office. And so I tosses his car. I gave him my business card. I was like, here you go. I was like, give me a call sometime. And he said, here's mine. And it said Lover's Lane on it. And I was like, I thought maybe it was like a franchise business. I'm like, oh, so you own one of the Lover's Lane stores? And he goes, no, I own all 32 of them. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, yeah, he goes, we need to really step up our game in in digital marketing, digital advertising. He goes, and we need somebody who understands how to do Google ads and social ads and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, and we just don't have anybody. And he goes, I'd like to hear like a proposal from you. I said, okay. So then I started working, but that was the thing, right? So like these guys had been doing really, really well for a number of years. They had used all the traditional channels. They had billboards. They had TV spots, radio spots, the alternative weekly, advertising, that kind of stuff. They had all that stuff. We were all very aware of their brand, but they really wanted to keep growing and change. So then through that process, we started working together. And then they actually followed me when I bolted from this agency, and I worked with them. They were one of my freelance clients, that I had. And, so Mike really showed me that, they're always thinking about, that next step, like where do we need to be? Where do we need to market? Where do we need to advertise? How do we reach the people that are going to be looking for our products and services? For them, reaching a younger generation, how are they going to do that? Instagram, TikTok, that sort of stuff. They need to continue to sell these products to younger people, because for the most part, the stuff that they sell there is more geared towards for the most part, a younger audience, but you also want to get your brand in front of them. So that way that's where they're going to go for these, novelties, as we say, that sort of stuff. So, interesting, like kind of thing that I learned in that process, was really just understanding that established brands still need to kind of expand their marketing, channels.
Yeah, no, it's a great lesson. And I wonder, for anyone listening, younger audience, I assume it's a younger 18 plus audience, but for,
yes.
when you're, just so we're clear on this podcast. But when you're working with an organization like that, change is very hard. And I wonder if, maybe the CEO, the president thought that, and there are others in the organization didn't, or just in general, how you work with them to take them from, okay, here's where you are, and here's how to try something new. Because when I read that, I'm like, it's a great lesson. I actually wrote a case study about Oreo and McDonald's recently, and how Oreo and McDonald's teamed up for influencer marketing for this Shamrock Shake they made together. And, I hadn't really thought of it at the time until I read your lesson, because I'm kind of used to this now. Okay, they did influencer marketing, but wait a minute, Oreo and McDonald's, they have two of the biggest media budgets in the world. They have two of the biggest brands in the world, and they're going out to these, frankly, little dinky influencers on Instagram or whatever, who, yeah, they have a following or whatever, but nothing compared to these massive media budgets. And yeah, they are, because like you said, hey, they're trying to stay ahead of what's next, and they're trying to innovate. But I just wonder, anything I've been involved with in my career that involves change, involves something new, never easy. It's never easy. So I wonder, do you have anything you learned from that, or advice of people to help get those brands to innovate?
Yeah. I always say that, like, when you're trying to get people to take on something new, I always say you have to be from Missouri. Show them. You have to be, that's
a Midwest joke. I wouldn't have gotten it. That's a very Midwest oriented joke.
The show me state. That's a show me state.
I get it.
I'm not from Missouri or anything like that, but I know this. So, but the thing is, like, that's the thing. Like, you have to show them. First off, you have to be trusted. Like, that's the thing. Like, companies that I've worked with in the past, they trusted me because I had proven my value to them on other things. And so when I would come to them and say, hey, I think this would be a good way to help you guys grow because of X, Y, Z. I'm not just one of those, like, hey, this will be great for you, and that's it. I want to, I usually back things up with information, data, things like that. And I say, this is something I think we need to do. And I would go, okay, yeah, well, give it a shot. That was the thing. So just give them a shot. So they would give you, a small budget of like, here, why don't you allocate X to this initiative that you want to launch and see what happens. And then from that, you can extrapolate. You can say, okay, look, we took $5,000 this month and we put it towards this, and this is what we got out of it. Now, in comparison, we were getting this with $5,000 with this idea or this idea. I think this is the way to go, and here's why. So it's really, like I said, it's all about showing them like this is where things are going. You have to be here in order to take advantage of this new, this new technology or this new channel or this new type of, product within, Google ads or something like that, whatever it is that you're trying to convince somebody to do. The other thing too, like, especially if you're in the situation I was in, which was, freelancing, you can always remind them that, like, I'm not charging you more. Like, I'm not making a dime off you taking on this initiative. Like, none whatsoever. We're on, we have an agreement that price has stayed the same. I'm not going anywhere. And so that's, and sort of like we take that here, one of the nice things about being at a startup like CircleIT is that I don't have that, like, that inculcated institutional inertia that needs to be, like, overcome to get like a new thing done. I go to Art and I say, hey, this is something we need to do. And he goes, cool, let's do it. We are always willing to throw something into something to get moving. That's the thing. And, again, it's to show me, like, okay, well, let's crawl, walk, run, let's start out slow and see if that works and then keep going from there. And to me, that process is always good. I've never been one that has told anybody like, oh my God, this is a winning formula. Let's throw all of your budget at it. We need to do a few things. And I used to tell people, whenever I would meet with a potential new client or whatever the case may be, one of the things I noticed where a lot of people were, they were promoting like one specific type of marketing product that they wanted you to like be all in on. All the ads you'd see, they'd be like, you need to be doing Facebook ads and you need to use me because I have a magic bullet that's going to shred through thing. And, one of the things I told people is I said, if anybody is trying to tell you to use your budget on literally one channel, run. Because that is not the way to do marketing and it's not the way to do advertising. It is a fundamental thing to be omnipresent and use at least a multi-channel approach to this product or to what you're doing. So, but that's my advice. If you need to try and get something, try to get something through and think it will help your company and your clients or whatever you're doing, show them.
Yeah.
And then that'll get it.
Yeah, we've published before. We had a keynote at one of our events with a Harvard professor called Michael Norton, and great trust through transparency. Fabulous keynote, and he just really kind of broke it down how, instead of trying to like, seen those vendors or whatever, force you on like, hey, I just trust me. I know this, I'm a pro at this, trust me. Versus, like you said, you give them some transparency and let them understand why. Here's your last lesson. Very personal, very impactful. Marketing can truly impact someone's life. And you learn this by working with a Metro Detroit area doctor. So how did you learn about the impact marketing can have?
Yeah. So my friend of mine calls me and he says, hey, he goes, my dad's in some trouble and I'm wondering if you think you could help him. And I knew his dad had been in trouble because it was all over the news in the area at the time. So it wasn't new to me that his father had been in trouble. But this had been a few months since the initial story broke. But so it turns out my friend's dad, who was a doctor, had his clinic raided by the DEA and the FBI because he had been writing prescriptions for himself because he had a drug addiction problem. He wasn't selling drugs out of his practice or anything like that. He was literally just writing himself scripts for painkillers and some other addictive medications. And, so this was shortly after my mom died, and I was still kind of trying to find my way in the world. And I said, what do you think I can do? I was, I'm a numbers guy. I don't really have much, application, and I don't know anything about medicine. So good luck. I'm not a nurse. And, he said, no, he's like, the problem is now, he said, Dad's been sober for, however many months it had been since then. And he said, but he goes, whenever somebody goes to look for him online, all they're seeing is this story. All they're seeing is this negative press, whether they type the name of the clinic in or his name or anything associated with it. It just shows up like that. And, I'm like, okay. I said, let me see if there's anything that can be done. I don't know. Like, literally zero marketing experience or knowledge at all here. I knew nothing about it. So I started doing my own research, and I happened across an article about search engine optimization, which is something I did not know existed. I didn't know at the time that you could impact the results you saw on the Google search engine results page or anything like that. No clue. I was like, oh, so they can actually make themselves show up more, as like a relevant thing so I'm like, okay. So I started just digging. I'm like, okay. So I was like, if we can help him rank higher for certain search terms, eventually these stories will start to, his website and information will start to be more prominent. Because at the end of the day, really he was hurting himself, of course, but, there was never one complaint from a patient about any kind of malpractice or anything along those lines. He wasn't even doing it at work. He was hyper focused when he was there, and then he would go home, and then this would start to happen. So I said, I called my friend back. I said, hey, this might help. I don't know. But look at this. Look at search engine optimization and start practicing that. And eventually, his website will start to show up higher than these news stories. And he said, I don't know how to do that. He goes, and frankly, and they were not close at this time either. Like, there was a lot of animosity as a result of all this. He said, and right now I don't feel like helping him. He said, but he goes, why don't you do it? And I said, okay, I guess, sure. let me take your dad's business in my hands, who's never done anything before. And, but the thing was, we were able to help him. I was able to do, just to take those principles. And of course, for those of you that do SEO, this is back when SEO was, quote unquote easy. it was a real simple, not simple, but it was a simpler process. Technical things weren't as important and things like that. And so you could really, just by publishing content and doing all these things, you could start to move up the ranks. And so we did that. And, so then eventually, and then all of a sudden, he was starting to get more patients again, and he was actually starting to retain patients because we instituted an email marketing platform that we could then kind of get that stuff going. So through that process, I had learned all about other marketing things. I learned about paid search ads. I learned about email marketing. I learned about all this stuff, all these new digital things that we could do. And I'm like, so then I said, let's, keep doing this stuff. And so then I was working with him, and then, eventually, he was doing well, and, I was moving on to doing other things. And, he called me, probably, I don't know, 3 years later, and said, he goes, listen, I don't know what I would have done if I lost my practice. He goes, I don't know. He goes, I can't tell you what would have happened. And then now I know that my friend and his dad are on good terms, and they go golfing together, and they go to the movies and things like that, and they hang out, and he's, he's clean and sober. And, at the end of the day, when I got into marketing or I got into doing anything, I really wanted to have a positive impact on people's lives in some way. And, you know, I'm lucky because I got to do that years ago. And then now again, in my current role, I feel like I'm doing something similar in a way. I'm giving some people something of value that's actually impacting their lives. You know, we hear from people all the time that, you know, oh, my mom was able to create, you know, this great video for our kids before she passed away, or, you know, we're impacting the lives of people who have Alzheimer's and their family and friends and their caregivers. And we're impacting military families who, you know, while they're deployed, you know, they're able to communicate easier through CircleIT than they are sometimes through other means. And they're able to make sure, like, because of the time difference, you know, if you're stationed overseas and your son or daughter has a birthday, you know, here in the States, for example, the time difference sometimes alone can be difficult to even communicate. But now you can schedule those cards and those messages to arrive when you want them to. So the kids do get them and they're like able to do that. So, you know, in a different way, I'm able to kind of use what I'm doing to impact people positively. And I think that that's important to me.
Well, yeah. And I think a real common thread I've seen in every lesson you've given is that, and I think it's something we can all learn from. So, you know, your story with the doctor is very powerful. And most of us, you know, maybe we'll never have that powerful of a story, but wherever you are working right now, you know, I got thinking when I read this, because I wrote this case study with a company called Third Love, and it was about their use of analytics. And that really seems like, honestly, to me, I'm a creative guy. It seems boring and not impactful and stuff, right? But Third Love, so it's this company, they sell women's undergarments, and they're really focused on body positivity. So they use that analytics. They're able to get in front of 20% more women, whatever. You know, maybe they impacted those women's lives by bringing that body positivity to them, or whatever it is. And so I'd argue anyone working for any brand now, you know, unless you think it's really harming customers, it's doing something wrong, then you should probably just get out. You know, but if it really does have a value proposition, if it really is serving the right customers, you know, marketing the right way and getting more of those customers, I mean, that's having a positive impact. And so you mentioned this doctor, you mentioned CircleIT. I would even argue the real estate company you talked about, right? By the way you change their marketing from just trying to like snatch all these leads by throwing up these forms to helping them find the right house. I mean, I think that also was something that was impactful and positive and really kind of hopefully changed the arc of some people's lives by the work you did. So kudos to you, Joe. Really appreciate some of these lessons you shared.
Yeah, no, it's been, it's just kind of the things I've learned over the years I've been doing this.
Well, let's break it down from all the lessons you shared, all we talked about, what it means to be a marketer. What are the key qualities of an effective marketer, in your opinion?
So I think that the best people I've seen in marketing, and again, I think this gets back to something we talked about earlier, and you're probably going to want to like throw me off the show at this point, is I think that the best marketers are those that are very analytical and understand what their data is telling them, and actually follow the data, not to try to like read the data the way that they think it should be read, but rather like actually figure out what the story is behind what they're seeing. But then also know how to handle the advertising side of it and get the messaging out. So I think you have to have a healthy mix of creative and analytical. And unfortunately, and this is going to sound bad, but once again, hot takes from the guy that used to do political radio. Not everybody has that mix. I know some fantastically creative people that don't understand numbers. And I know some real numbers geeks that aren't creative, you know? So like the most effective, like individual marketers I've met are people that have like a real healthy mix of those two particular, you know, like right brain, left brain, right? Like that sort of mix. But also too, I think that the third thing I can think of that's really impactful or makes somebody really good at marketing is they care about the people they're marketing to and for. They care about the people that are receiving the message, but then also the people that they're speaking on the behalf of. that I think is, to me, is something that matters, because the best experiences I've had as a marketer have been when those two things have been very much in line. The messaging that I'm able to create with my, with who I'm working for, but then also who I'm speaking to, and those are like the things like that. If we can get those things lined up, that to me is impactful. So a good marketer, as I said, would be somebody that can, that can kind of meld the analytical and the creative, but then also has a level of empathy with their client or their customer and the person that they're trying to market to.
Well, thank you, Jay. I think the care for the people that we call customers is very evident in all of your lessons today. So thank you for sharing your career with us and how you've been able to do that in your career.
Thanks for having me. It was nice to finally meet the guy behind a lot of the stuff that I've read in the last few years. So interesting stuff. And I hope people that are listening to this are able to take something away from it.
Absolutely, yes. And thanks to everyone for listening. We care about you very much. So hopefully you got good ideas for your marketing campaigns and careers as well.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.